Chapter 33. Shane knelt in a small clearing beneath the halo of moonlight and twirled the purple gum wrapper between his thumb and index finger. It was one of many he found littering the ground at the edge of the forest. His sister's ex-husband was the only person he knew who chewed Buster Grape bubblegum. He remembered the man had craved the syrupy sweet flavor like an addict. This had to be Ethan's campfire. And with the embers still glowing, he hadn't been gone long. "I reckon he ain't far away," Shane whispered to Ashley and Kyle. Their brother nodded, sweeping his flashlight across the area surrounding the fire. Ashley kicked dust onto the embers. "I don't understand why the police couldn't find Ethan's camp. Didn't they search this part of the county?" "Good question, Ashley." Kyle nodded. "Yeah, they even brought out tracking dogs," he said, "but Ethan was probably holed up with some of his kin. I figure he's been moving from place to place. He ain't stood still long enough to get caught." Shane agreed with Kyle. The cops had combed Laurel County from top to bottom and had come up empty. But now they finally had a good lead. He couldn't wait to get his hands on Ethan. The man deserved to die for what he'd done to Ashley, never mind the murders he committed since he escaped from prison. Shane had never met a man more evil in all his life. He couldn't understand the reasons his sister had fallen for the piece of low-life scum. He figured it must be because of her pure heart. She always looked for the best in people. Ethan had tricked Ashley into believing he was a good person, and then he abused her. Shane planned to make him pay for it. He stood up, wondering if they should hide and wait for his sister's ex to return to the site. It might take hours, but he didn't mind. When the man returned, Shane would make his presence known. He hoped the lowlife would give him an excuse, not that he felt he really needed one, to put a bullet in the man's brain. "Look here," Kyle said, excitement in his voice. Their brother directed his flashlight toward the ground between two oak trees. Tracks from the four-wheeler cut through the underbrush to the southeast and then disappeared into the darkness of the forest. "And here too." Kyle pointed the beam at another set of tracks leading southwest. Both sets appeared fresh. One set of tracks was obvious where Ethan had come into the clearing, and the other were where he'd gone out, but there was no way to tell which track led away from the campsite. He could have fled in either direction. "Which way?" Shane asked, wondering which track his brother wanted to follow first. Kyle hesitated as though he was thinking the matter through. Maybe we best split up." "That ain't a good idea," his brother finally said. They didn't know how much of a lead Ethan had on them. He was riding a four-wheeler and they were on foot. If they hoped to catch up to him, they would have to act fast. It made sense for them to split up, but was that really a good idea? No. He locked eyes with his older brother. He had an uneasy feeling that something bad might happen, and it will, to Kyle or Ashley if they parted ways. Although he was younger, Shane was both bigger and stronger than Kyle. He felt he could handle Ethan alone. So did the security guard. But could his brother? Even if Ashley went with Kyle, Shane feared the fugitive might get the drop on his brother, might take away his take away his rifle. If it came down to hand-to-hand combat, Kyle wouldn't win, and Ashley would be left to face her ex's wrath. "We should stick together," Shane said. "Good idea." Shane shook his head. "You're thinking he might best me," he stated. Don't worry, he won't. I'm smarter than him." Somehow the older brother had always been able to read his thoughts, a skill that amazed and sometimes irritated him. "Yeah, but," he let his voice trail off. Of the two of them, Kyle usually proved to be the one who made the better decision. However, Shane still wasn't convinced that splitting up was the right thing to do. "We need to hurry before he kills somebody else," his brother reminded him. "He could be after Daddy." Kyle seemed determined, and Shane knew he was right. Ethan might be on his way to kill their father. He couldn't let that happen. "Okay," he relented, hoping he wouldn't regret it. He and Kyle had always shared a tight bond. His older brother was part of him. If he lost Kyle, it would be like losing his right arm. And if anything bad happened to Ashley, he couldn't even bear the thought of what it would do to him. He'd have to make sure his siblings stayed together so they could protect each other. He wanted to stack the odds in his brothers' and sister's favor. Ashley, go with you, Shane said, and I'll go this way. He chose the track that led southwest toward the location of their father's home. He guessed Ethan might be searching the property again, looking for their sister. Kyle nodded. All right. He pulled out his cell phone. I've got 2 bars of service. Put your phone on vibrate, and if you find him, don't do nothing. Hide and call me. Okay. Kyle looked at him, touched him on the shoulder. Shane smiled and pulled his brother into a hug. Then he wrapped his arms around Ashley and kissed her cheek. Please be careful and watch your back, his sister said. Kyle and Ashley disappeared into the shadows. After switching his cell to silent mode, he said vibrate, he ain't say silent. Shane plunged into the forest, following the ATV tracks. He kept his rifle poised for action. He hoped he picked the right path, that he would be the one to catch up with Ethan, not Kyle and Ashley. He wondered whether the trail would lead back home where his father slept. He knew his father was armed, and Kyle had booby-trapped both the front and back doors of the house. If anyone broke in, they'd be met by a shotgun blast. But Shane still wasn't sure that splitting up had been the right decision. Even if Kyle was strong enough to protect himself, what if something happened and he and Ashley got separated? Could she protect herself? His sister had practically raised him after their mother died. She always taken care of him, had put his needs first when they were growing up, and she was the smartest person he ever known, except when it came to men. She had a habit of letting her heart rule her brain. He'd been too young to prevent her from sneaking off to be with Ethan, but he tried to warn her about Brett. From the moment he first laid eyes on Moneybag, he sensed the man was no good. At least now his sister had come to her senses and had broken off her engagement. He just wished she hadn't been hurt in the process. But if Shane had anything to say about it, no man would ever hurt Ashley again. A few yards ahead, he noticed a break in a tree cover. As he'd been walking, he felt like the tracks had gradually shifted directions. When he reached the clearing, he looked up at the sky, noting the position of the moon. He realized he was now headed due south. He checked the compass app on his phone to make sure. The tracks were no longer leading towards his father's house. They were heading towards the home of Kyle's girlfriend, Janet. Maybe Ashley had been right. Ethan could be stalking the brother's girlfriend. Shane plowed ahead, hoping that Janet was no longer home, that she kept her promise to Kyle and had left town. At least he knew Robin was already on the road. She called him when she reached Chattanooga on her way to Georgia. Shane heard a noise up ahead of him on the right, a thump. He stood still, holding his breath. It could be a forest animal, or it could be Ethan. After a moment, he crept forward. Thump, thump. He dropped to one knee, aiming his rifle toward the sound. Without warning, Shane was hit from behind. His AR-15 knocked from his hands. He scrambled on his stomach, trying to reach his rifle, but the man was on top of his back. A fist slammed into the side of his head. Shane jerked his body backward, trying to fling the man off of him. As he flipped to his side in the glow of the moonlight, he caught sight of the attacker's face. Ethan. His fist crashed into the jaw of his sister's ex. Blood sprayed Shane's chest along with what he thought was a tooth. Ethan fell backwards and Shane lunged on top of him, plummeting his fist between his attacker's stomach and chest. Then he aimed for the man's nose. Shane planned to beat the face of his sister X to a bloody pulp, and he wouldn't stop until Ethan's brains were splattered across the ground. Before he could strike the punch, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a dark object fly towards him. He dodged to the right, but it was too late. Ethan had managed to grab the rifle. The butt of the weapon bashed against the side of Shane's head. The blow reverberated through his skull. Stars exploded in front of Shane's eyes. He blinked. The world was spinning, and he couldn't focus his vision. Ethan slung him to the side. Shane rolled onto his knees and tried to regain his balance to get his feet under him, but Ethan moved fast. Shane looked up. He glimpsed the rock barreling towards him. Pain sliced through Shane's neck and ran down his spine. A black haze engulfed him. Chapter 34. Ashley crept behind Cal, silent as a bobcat, following the ATV tracks through the dense forest. Her face still stung where the rat had scratched her and sweat coated her back beneath the camo shirt, but she refused to let the minor discomfort get to her. She was thankful she'd been able to convince Kyle and Shane to let her join them. If she stayed home, she'd be pacing the floor, terrified her brothers would never return. She hoped Shane would be okay by himself. Kyle seemed to think he would. Her older brother had spent hours upon hours hunting with Shane, trekking through the woods, dodging wild hogs, snakes, and even bobcats. Kyle knew their younger brother's strengths and weakness. He would never have allowed them to split up if he thought harm would come to Shane. But concern still tugged at her heart, refusing to let go. The tracks curved hard to the right. Up ahead, she saw a break in the tree cover. Kyle stopped and turned around. "I know where we at," he whispered. "That's the road the church is on. We done hit a dead end." Ashley thought it looked familiar. "I guess we should turn around and try to catch up with Shane," she said. "Let me text him. Tell him to wait for us." She watched as Kyle pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. She was glad they'd be meeting back up with their brother and wondered how long it would take to reach him. She hoped they have better luck on the other trail, but Shane obviously hadn't found any clues yet, or he would have already let them know. Kyle slipped his phone in his pocket and then set out again, heading back toward the clearing. On the other side of Ethan's campsite, Ashley followed Kyle down the tracks Shane had taken earlier. Keeping her feet inside the depression created by one of the ATV wheels, she recalled a map of the area in her mind. A knot of fear formed in her chest when she realized the four-wheeler had taken a southwest path. "Are we walking towards Daddy's house?" she whispered to Kyle. "We was, but the trail shifted. We've been turning south." Ashley was relieved to hear that Ethan hadn't been heading towards Spencer's property. She knew her father was well armed and that he was an expert marksman, but she didn't want her ex-husband to go anywhere near him. She looked up and noticed a clearing ahead. She wondered whether Shane had chosen that spot to wait for them or whether he already passed through when Kyle sent the text. When they broke out of the cover of the tree line, her older brother stopped short. Kyle jerked his arm back towards her, blocking her path. He looked at Ashley and shook his head. She scanned the clearing before them and noticed something on the ground a few yards away. In the moonlight, it appeared to be some type of animal. She couldn't tell whether it was alive or dead, but from Kyle's reaction, he believed it wasn't friendly. He motioned for her to stay put. She obeyed, watching as her brother slinked toward the black form poised to fire his rifle. When he reached the animal, Kyle dropped to his knees. "No," he moaned. Fear shot through Ashley's heart. She ran towards Kyle. As she neared the dark form, it morphed into a shape of a human. It was Shane. Tears streamed down her face and she heard a cry echo from her lips. She knelt next to Kyle as she fought to keep shock from taking hold of her body. Blood covered Shane's head, neck, and the back of his shirt. He was unconscious. Please don't let him be dead. The premonition she had earlier popped into her mind. Why hadn't she listened to her instincts? She should have tried harder to stop the hunt. If Shane was dead, it was her fault. "He still got a pulse," Kyle told her, "but we can't move him. I think his neck might be broken." Ashley pulled out her phone and dialed 911, putting the call on speaker. "911, what's the location of your emergency?" The operator asked. "We're in the woods near Stillwater's Chapel." "No," Kyle interrupted. "We're close to the Turkey Creek Road." They need to come that way. When we hear them coming, we'll run down and meet them at the road. Did you hear that? Ashley asked the operator. Yes. What's the nature of your emergency? My brother's been hurt really bad. He's unconscious and we think his neck might be broken. We need an ambulance. Is he breathing? Yes. It's important that you don't try to move him. Just keep him warm and wait for the paramedics. The man who hurt my brother is an escaped convict. His name is Ethan Barrett. I don't know for sure, but I think he may still be in the area. The police will be notified as well. Ashley ended the call, releasing the sob she'd been holding back. She ripped off the camouflage shirt and draped it over Shane. She looked at Kyle and saw tears glistening in his eyes as well. She couldn't remember ever seeing her brother cry before, not since he was a small child. Kyle returned her gaze. He grabbed her hand and held it tight while they waited for the wail of the emergency sirens. See you in the next chapter.